Welcome to the Endowment Effect, presented by Eddie Yang, Miguel Vivaldo, and Lydia Ding. Hello, 008. Your mission today is to explain the endowment effect, provide studies and show how it affects people, explain what influences this effect, and provide real-life examples. Your first task today is to explain to Sarah what the endowment effect is and why it's irrational. The failure to do so will result in an F. The endowment effect. What is it? Well, the endowment effect describes the fact that people demand much more to give up an object than they are willing to spend to acquire it. Let's take a look at Sarah for an example. Sarah is this ordinary shopper. She's in love with this Gucci bag that is last in stock. She knows if the bag was over $700, she would not buy it. But luckily, it was only $650, so she ended up purchasing it. So one day, Sarah was walking with her Gucci bag, and her best friend, Cindy, came up to her and said, "Oh my, I love that bag. How much could I buy that off of you for?" Sarah thought for a moment, and then she replied, "I don't know, give me your best offer." Cindy replied, "How about $800? Sarah was thinking, but since I own this purse, I don't really want to sell it for less than $1,200 because it's mine. Wait, hold on a second. Sarah bought that bag for $650, but won't be willing to sell it for less than $1,200. Why is that? Well, as we know, it's because of the endowment effect. Sarah now values the purse even more now because it's personally hers. So let's take a look at Sarah's behavior. She bought a $650 Gucci bag and received an offer for $800 by her friend Cindy. And if she decided to sell, she'd make a $150 profit. But she didn't. This behavior is irrational. Well, why is this irrational? In accordance to the wealth maximization theory, people will maximize their profits and gains. Sarah has the ability to make a $150 profit, but she refuses to because of the endowment effect. So when we look at the previous example, when Cindy offered $800 to Sarah, because Sarah is rational, she accepts the offer and makes $150. With all of that information, now we'll move on to Lydia Ding, who will explain some studies done on the endowment effect and how it affects some people.
One of the most famous studies are involving coffee mugs. In 1990, Richard Thaler, along with Daniel Kahneman and Jack Natch, published experimental research that illustrated the power of the endowment effect. For the study, college students were randomly assigned to one of three conditions: seller, buyer, or chooser. Sellers were given a university mug and asked if they would sell it for between $0 and $9.25. Buyers were asked if they would purchase the mug for a price in that range. Choosers were given the option at each price to choose between the mug and the same amount of cash. Results showed that sellers who already owned the mugs placed a significantly higher value on the mugs than the other two groups did. Specifically, sellers required a medium sum of $7.12 to give up the mug, while choosers said the mugs were worth a medium of $3.12, and buyers were willing to pay a medium of $2.87. Another example of how the endowment effect affecting people's decision in marketing comes from the real estate market. During a downturn yielded in Boston, the author of the study compared the behavior of owners of similar units who had bought their condo apartment at different prices. For a rational agent, the buying price is irrelevant history. The current market value is all that matters. Not so for humans in a down market for housing. Owners who have a high reference point and thus face higher losses, set a higher price on their dwelling, spend a longer time trying to sell their home, and eventually receive more money. The question is, what exactly causes the endowment effect? The recent research shows that ownership of an item creates a link between that item and our identity. In 2012, Sarah Lauren Dahmer and Vanessa Swaminathan had undergraduates role-play a transaction around a ballpoint pen. Specifically, sellers were given pens and asked whether they would prefer to keep the pen or exchange it for a cash amount between 25 cents and $10. Buyers saw the pen and decided whether to take the pen or a cash sum in that range. Before the role-play, experimenters asked some students to image a past relationship in which they felt unloved and write about their thoughts and feelings. Others wrote about an average day. Results indicated that sellers who thought about rejection placed a higher value on the pen than students who'd written about an average day. But self-threat did not have the same effect on buying prices. The researchers wrote, after a social self-threat, individuals likely have strong perception self-links because perceptions can enhance the self and help individuals cope with the threat. In other words, we may have a hard time separating from things once we feel like they're part of us. Whether you are involved in a transaction for a mug, a dwelling, or a pen, it helps to be aware of the endowment effect and its influence on our behavior. Nowadays, endowment effect has become an important topic not only among behavioral economists but also among psychologists, because this theory clearly explains why human behavior derives from standard economic theory. As it turns out, our decisions and behavior aren't always rational, but are instead heavily influenced by emotions and cognitive blind spots. If we can take a step back and realize why an item is so meaningful, we may have an easier time negotiating a favorable outcome. Now I will turn to Miguel Viviado to explain what influences this effect and provide real-life examples.
Agent, your briefing is almost over, and now it is time to finalize your understanding of the endowment effect by learning of the factors which influence this behavior and some practical business applications associated with it. Humans are inherently loss averse. This causes the endowment effect to occur. In this case, loss aversion refers to the tendency of people to strongly prefer avoiding losses than acquiring gains. Some studies suggest that losses are as much as twice as psychologically powerful as gains. The endowment effect describes the fact that people demand much more to give up an object than they are willing to spend to acquire it. The existence of this effect has been documented in numerous experiments. Interestingly, however, the endowment effect questions the credibility of another crucial concept, the Coase theorem. According to the Coase theorem, in a market with no transaction cost, the allocation of resources between two bargaining individuals will be the same, efficient, and should be independent of the initial definition of property rights. The Coase theorem's prediction that the final allocation of resources will be independent thus relies on one important assumption. An individual will value an asset or a right to make an action the same whether considering its acquisition or loss. Consequently, we can say that the maximum willingness to pay will be the same as the minimum compensation to accept. This normative notion takes into account the rationality of individuals, but Due to the endowment effect, are individuals rational actors? Well, I guess not. People usually value gains and losses in terms of changes from some reference point rather than comparing the value of the end result. If this is the case, the Coase theorem's prediction that the allocation of resources will be independent of the initial assignment of property rights does not hold. In the last few years, however, psychologists have pointed out that the endowment effect results not from loss aversion, as traditionally thought, but from a sense of possession, a feeling that an object is mine. In one experiment involving coffee mugs, researchers found that buyers were willing to pay as much for a coffee mug as sellers demanded when the buyers already owned an identical mug. In another experiment, buyers' brokers and sellers' brokers agreed on the price of the mug, but both brokers traded at higher prices when they happened to own mugs that were identical to the ones they were trading. Given relative information and buyer and seller preferences, we can therefore conclude that ownership and not loss aversion causes the endowment effect. The endowment effect is higher for goods associated with the notion of self. One implication of these findings is applicable for clothing stores. If ownership increases how much a customer is willing to pay for a good, it would be wise for store owners to stimulate a sense of ownership in their customers. In a retail sense, think of fitting rooms. Research suggests that customers are more willing to purchase an item of clothing after they try it on. Similar tactics include free trials, sampling, and coupons. Congratulations, agent. This concludes your briefing of the endowment effect.